Stanford University.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to our final event in the Security Conundrum Speaker Series. I'm Amy Ziegert. I'm the co-director of the Center for International Security and Cooperation and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. We have a very special speaker tonight who's drawn a very big crowd, particularly so close to final exams. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to two distinguished members of our audience who have joined us here tonight. John Hennessy, Stanford's incomparable 10th president and a pioneering computer scientist, and my dear Hoover colleague, George Shultz, who served in 4 different cabinet positions, including Secretary of State. We are so glad that you could join us here tonight. The Security Conundrum Speaker Series, which has run throughout this academic year, was designed to be an open inquiry into the ongoing debate about how to balance security and liberty in the digital age. The idea grew out of a course that my partner in this series, Phil Taubman, teaches here at Stanford. In fact, it's going on this quarter, and it's called Need to Know: The Tension Between a Free Press and National Security Decision-Making. Now, after last year's disclosure of widespread NSA surveillance programs, Phil and I wanted to start a serious and lasting conversation across campus, examining the relationship between secrecy, security, and liberty from different perspectives. So each session in this series throughout the year has featured a deeper dive into one particular vantage point of the security conundrum, pairing a distinguished visitor in conversation with a Stanford faculty member. We began inside the National Security Agency. General Michael Hayden, the former director of NSA and former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, discussed the decision-making process that led to the beginning of these programs and gave a full-throated defense of those programs. Next, we moved inside the newsroom, hearing from Barton Gellman, the Washington Post reporter who released a large bulk of the Snowden revelations to the public and who won a Pulitzer Prize for his efforts on that team. Last month, we moved inside Congress. Senator Mark Udall joined us to talk about congressional reform efforts and his views about civil liberties concerns. If you missed any of these earlier events, you can find them on Stanford's YouTube page or our iTunes U page. Tonight, we welcome Senator Dianne Feinstein to share her perspective as one of the leading voices in this national debate. And just to make it timely, Phil and I have engineered to make sure that a key law in the NSA controversy, Section 215 of the Patriot Act, will expire at midnight on Sunday, or expire on Monday, generating, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, new headlines and new headaches for lawmakers on all sides of the NSA surveillance debate. In fact, there is no better time than tonight to look at the past, the present, and the future of NSA surveillance programs. And no better person to help us understand these issues than Senator Dianne Feinstein. She has been, as we know, at the vortex of this tumultuous debate, serving as chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence from 2009 to 2014, and now serving as vice chair and ranking member of that committee. She has also played a leading role, an instrumental role, in the Senate investigation on the CIA's detention and interrogation program, pressing to publicly declassify a lengthy summary of the Senate's 6,000-page report late last year. Now, in many ways, we are welcoming Senator Feinstein home here tonight. She has, as you know, deep roots in the Bay Area. She was born in San Francisco. She served 2 terms as the mayor of San Francisco and went on to serve as senator for this state for more than 20 years. In fact, most Stanford undergraduates do not know a time when the state of California was not represented by Senator Feinstein. We are, of course, also welcoming her home to Stanford. Senator Feinstein received her BA here from Stanford in 1955 in history, She was also a member of the university's Young Democrats, and she got her start in government right here on campus as vice president of her class. My Stanford colleague, Phil Taubman, will lead tonight's discussion with Senator Feinstein. Phil is a consulting professor at the Center for International Security and Cooperation, and before that, he spent 30 years at the New York Times, where he was a reporter and editor and served as the Washington bureau chief of the Times. Like Senator Feinstein, Phil also has deep roots at Stanford and got his start here. He was editor-in-chief of the Stanford Daily back in 1969. Before we welcome them both onto the stage, just a few housekeeping items I want to mention. If you haven't already, I ask that you please silence your cell phones. I want to note that Stanford Video is recording this event, and it will be available online. All of you should have in front of you or nearby cards and pencils so that you can write questions. We invite you all to write your questions during the course of the event. We will be incorporating questions from the audience, your questions, periodically during the conversation. And before we welcome them onto the stage, let me close by thanking the 6 partner organizations that have come together to co-produce this series throughout the academic year: the Center for International Security and Cooperation, the Hoover Institution, the Freeman-Spogli Institute for International Studies, Stanford Law School, Stanford Continuing Studies, and the student group Stanford in Government. And now please join me in welcoming Phil Taubman and Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you particularly, Senator Feinstein, for being here. Welcome back home.
Thank you very much.
So as you know from Amy, I'm a news guy. And there's a lot of news going on in Washington these days involving the issues that we're going to talk about tonight. So I thought we would start with what's in the foreground right now. Senator Feinstein is flying back to Washington on Saturday for a rare Sunday session of the Senate. And if the Senate is unable to come to agreement in some form to extend the metadata collection that was authorized shortly after the attacks on 9/11, metadata, telephone data, that section of the law, the Patriot Act, Section 215, will expire at midnight on Sunday. President Obama has appealed to the Senate to try to come to some kind of agreement. There is a law pending that has been approved by the House of Representatives. It's called the USA Freedom Act. It would modify the metadata program. It would no longer be, the data would no longer be collected and maintained by the National Security Agency. Instead, it would be maintained by the telephone companies. If it expires, this system of trying to prevent terrorist attacks would go cold or dark for a period of time. So it's actually high drama in Washington come Sunday. So Senator Feinstein, if you wouldn't mind, let's start. Why don't you tell everyone, first of all, what your view is about what should happen, and then what you think is going to happen on Sunday.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. And ladies and gentlemen, you have, I think, no way of knowing how much it means to me to be back on this campus, and to be back on the campus, particularly with a granddaughter who is a graduating senior. And so I think, Phil, you did it as well as it's been done. It's a very accurate statement of what has transpired. There is a section of the Patriot Act that controls lone wolf business records, and in the business records section is the 215 program. An appellate court has just held, and it's on page 82 of the decision. It's called a holding, and that holding is that you cannot derive this program from that section. So it is important, if the program is going to be continued, I think that we recognize, although there have been other court decisions that have said it's legal and fine, that we recognize that some reform is in order. Let me say a couple of things. It is often depicted as a surveillance program. In my view, it is not. In my view, surveillance is observation over a period of time, up close and personal. That's not what this is. What this is the use of telephone data that when a known terrorist calls into this country, that the place he calls, if it looks like it may be suspicious, reasonable, articulable suspicion, the NSA, through 22 people only who are highly trained, can query that data. The reform of that part in the Patriot Act is that they would go to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court for a warrant to be able to do so. That is a court established under law, which has 11 federal district judges, all appointed by the Chief Justice, who oversees all of these kinds of issues. And if it looks like there is some reason to go further than just a name and a time and a number, then you go to the FBI for a probable cause warrant to be able to collect content. But most people think it's automatically the collection of the content of American phone calls. That is not true. In 2013, the program was used 288 times, queries, and FBI warrants to collect content was sought in 12 cases. So it has been selectively used. And the people using it from the NSA, all highly trained, all highly supervised, 20 people plus 2 supervisors, to the best of my knowledge, has carried out the program in a way that has been sound and positive. However, there is a very strong feeling that the President has, that members of the House have, and I think it's a feeling that has some justification, and that is that the National Security Administration, the NSA, agency, should not hold the data. So the big reform is that the data would be held, as Phil said, by the telecoms. And if it was to be queried, they'd go to the FISA court, they would get a warrant from the FISA court, and then they could query the number and the one hop that a known terrorist was calling in the United States. The production of this, of good data from this in terms of preventing a terrorist attack it's used in conjunction with other programs, but there have been approximately 54 instances, over half of them, having to do with incidents in Europe, actually. So that data, that was communicated to the intelligence agencies of those countries. But I think the one case that's the most prominent was Nazibul Azazi, who was putting together a combination of people to use beauty shop products to build a bomb to blow up the New York subway. And there were a number of arrests and convictions in that case, and Mr. Azazi, as well as I think 6 of his compatriots, are now doing time in a federal penitentiary. So it's a program with some controversy. I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't go on and say this, but I don't think during my lifetime I've ever seen the degree to which evil exists out in the world today. The beheading of small children, just because. The assassination of 700 troops at a time, which I happened to watch on television, who were frog-marched in their underwear and then just mowed down by a line of ISIS fighters with AK-47s. The fact that ISIS is now in 12 countries, the fact that they occupy, not threaten, but occupy a third of Syria and a third of Iraq. The fact that they are not like Al-Qaeda. They own, they come in, they run a government. They steal or take oil money or wherever they can. They train fighters. They appeal to fighters who are coming in from all over the world. And they are, in my view, the personification of evil. It all stops when I see a 6-year-old child that I've seen. I won't describe it, but her head is missing. And that, to me, is a unique evil that needs to be stopped. And the degree to which they can come after us, I don't know. But I do know that it has been successful in 9/11. I do know that all of the intelligence is out for a lone wolf, a single person who may have access to certain materials to kill. When that'll happen, where it'll happen, I don't know. But these programs, ladies and gentlemen, aim to protect this country, pure and simple. They're not really aimed to go after Americans. The CIA cannot go after Americans. The FBI can with a warrant.
So when I started covering these issues for the New York Times back in the mid-1970s, the Church Committee, headed by Senator Frank Church, another Stanford-connected person, had just finished its work, and the committee that Senator Feinstein has chaired and then is now ranking minority member, the committee was created back in those days because of a series of abuses by intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA, FBI in particular. And I think I went back and reread parts of that report.
In the 70s, Phil?
In the 70s. Yeah. The abuses were in the 60s and 70s. I went back and reread parts of that report this afternoon just to remind myself that I think we know these agencies are well-intentioned, but there is a long history of these agencies acting beyond the writ that they have received from the United States Congress. So are you not worried? Did we not see, in fact, with the programs disclosed by Edward Snowden, that the NSA in particular sort of took a mandate and then went way beyond it?
No, I don't believe that's the case. Is there reason to worry, to be concerned, to provide oversight? Yes. The 1970s and 1976 produced the Church Report, and the Church Committee found out that there were terrible things going on. Martin Luther King, all kinds of terrible things, no question about that. And that's how the intelligence committees were formed in the House and the Senate, to provide oversight of these agencies. Well, it's an imprecise science, not even a science. And where I think our committee's biggest contribution there started when we learned that tapes had been destroyed over the torture of certain detainees. And Senator Rockefeller at the time was chairman of the committee, and he ordered the staff to just look at 3 detainees. And that report came back, and the whole committee, Republican and Democrat, was horrified. And so by a very strong vote, 14-1, we decided that we were going to take a look at high-value detainees and how they were interrogated and what the conditions of detention were. And what we found after 6 years of good staff working day and night and weekends was that there was horrible abuse. First, that the program was not effective. Second, third, that it was mismanaged, that contractors were hired who knew nothing about Al-Qaeda, nothing about about interrogating individuals who were former SEALs, and terrible things, in my view, were done. So we began, not we, but the staff began, we formed an agreement with the then director of the CIA, Leon Panetta, and we were granted access to all cables, all information, all emails. And we began to take a very good look. See, it's one thing when people come before you and you have to make a decision whether you're being told the truth or not. It's another thing when you really look at the daily record of what goes on, how something's managed. And when we did that, to make a long story short, we found that there were really terrible miscarriages of justice, brutality, poor management, and in the 20 cases that had been bandied around as producing actionable intelligence, that was not true in any of them. So this report was put out. As a matter of fact, we have a few copies in the back of the room. If you'd like to pick one up and take it and read it, you're certainly welcome to it. If there aren't enough, leave your name and we'll send you a copy. I think it's a very important statement to say never again, that this is not what the United States of America is about. Now, where am I going with all of this? Intelligence agencies seem to me to be very close to presidents. And presidents, almost right or wrong, either party, tend to defend them. I haven't figured out exactly why yet. The president essentially controls classified information. The president decides whether something is declassified or remains classified. And there are very real punishments for disclosing classified information, as journalists are learning and others are learning through court decision making. So the truth, how do you make these agencies follow the law? There's only one way, really, and that's calling them up short, is being able to get in deep enough and close enough to know. And by making it very difficult to tell an untruth to what's called power, meaning in a hearing. And it's very difficult to know, even in a classified hearing, if you're being told the truth or not. So looking at these programs on a daily basis, assessing them, is really important. And the political culture doesn't want to do it. But I think it's very important that we do it. And this was so secret, so a program that began in early 2002 wasn't briefed to most of us until 2006. And the man who briefed us, Director Hayden, did a terrible job. And some of us sent him letters afterwards saying that we were not adequately briefed. And that became very clear as we learned the depth and breadth and mistakes in this program.
So let me follow up with that a kind of, I guess you'd call it a political science question. The Senate Intelligence Committee has how many Senate members?
15.
And how many staff work for the committee?
Oh, David, I forget. What's the number now? What?
40.
40.
40. Okay. 15 senators, 40 staff members. how in the world can you keep track of what agencies are doing that have tens of thousands of employees and are spending billions of dollars? Granted, this Congress controls the purse, but do you feel, it's something that struck me over the years writing about this in Washington, you're outgunned. Basically, you're trying to monitor hundreds, thousands of different programs, relatively small handful of people in the Senate and the House. Do you think that you can really monitor them? And if not, what kind of alteration in the system could be created to make it more effective?
I've thought about that, Phil, and I haven't come up with one yet. Just because of the specific nature of it, the classified nature of all of this, and the fact that you have, just like anything else in politics and in public office, it runs the spectrum. There are people who want to be comrades, who want to be viewed as close. It's kind of the macho thing. There are others that look at this as real oversight. You know, we've got to hold people attributable. We've got to press the question. We've got to look beyond the hearing. And that's what we began during my presidency. It's also very difficult because I think it's fair to say, 5 years before I became president, before I became chairman, there were no intelligence authors. Dr. Hennessy, don't do that.
We wish you were president. Right?
There were no intelligence authorization bills passed because nobody could agree. Yeah. So I was very lucky. I had a Georgia Republican by the name of Saxby Chambliss, and I shared everything with him. And I shared it before, and sometimes we disagreed, and we worked it out. But we came together, and we've passed, what, 5 intelligence authorization bills, 6 in a row. Those are the bills where we established the law, where we changed the law. So we were able to do 6 of those. And it all goes down to bipartisanship. And that's the key nature of what we do. And I think we have better luck. We've been able to pre-conference bills, which means you work out with the House differences even before. For example, if you know you're going to go to conference, you work as much as you can before the bills pass. And when the bills pass, it's easier to get it done, because most times our bills have to pass the Senate by unanimous consent, which is difficult to do. But when you work bipartisan, you can get it done. And I'm very proud of that fact, and that we did it for so long.
So, you know, the Church Committee talks about the difficulty in a democratic society of operating secret intelligence agencies. It's almost a, you know, a non sequitur.
It's an oxymoron, yes.
Oxymoron. So, you know, what are your thoughts about how we as a democratic society, represented by people like you in the Congress, can maintain some control over these agencies, and what limits must we put on them? Because given a free rein, they will undoubtedly keep going as far as they can.
Phil, I can tell you this. There is no country on earth, big country, that has an intelligence committee, that has the laws, which are now codified, that does this. We meet with the UK. Matter of fact, I just met with 5 ministers over a detainee about a week ago. 5 members of parliament, I should say, about a week ago. They don't have as strong oversight as we do. The French don't, the Germans don't. Now, Russia has a huge intelligence agency. China is new in this, huge, big, devoted toward fiduciary intelligence, getting into companies, staying there for 3 years, draining companies of their fiduciary information, trying to gain knowledge this way. You can't abdicate the field because we'll get eaten up. This is a place of innovation. There's one thing, there's innovation and there's imitation. This country innovates, and those innovations people look for, they lust for, they violate all kinds of systems to get. So you do need to protect yourself and protect our people. The FSB, which was the KGB, is huge in the world. They run agents in this country, all of them.
You know, one of your predecessors, Senator Pat Moynihan, former Harvard professor, went on to serve in the United States Senate representing New York State. He wrote a book about secrecy. He was on the Intelligence Committee along with Barry Goldwater and others when it was first created. And Senator Moynihan, whom I knew well, he and I would often meet in his Senate office and talk about secrecy. And his view was that our society was in danger of being swallowed up by too much secrecy and insufficient transparency. So here you are, you're on the Intelligence Committee. Why can't you do something to reduce the amount of secrecy in national security affairs in Washington?
Well, that's a good question, and I take it at heart. And I think if I have done something I would change, it would be I would hold more open hearings. And I've reflected on that, but it's difficult to do because you don't get the same information in an open hearing that you get in a classified hearing. And I think you can understand that.
So let's go back to 2/15, back to Sunday, this coming Sunday. What do you think is actually going to happen? Do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. And this is David Granis, who's our staff director in the front row, and he is quite wonderful, but I don't let it go to his head. And we were talking about it on the way down. And according to our rules, which is a 1,500-page volume called Riddick's Rules, the only thing that can be brought up before the body is a reconsideration of the bill. Amendments can then be sought. Cloture has not been gained. Cloture means you've got to have 60 out of 100 votes in the Senate to go to a vote, which requires a majority vote. So one of the things that's happened, ladies and gentlemen, is that we've become a Senate that's a product of a supermajority as opposed to just a majority. When I came to the Senate and did the assault weapons legislation, there was no cloture, and it was a very controversial bill. There was a motion to table, and we won it by one vote, and it passed with 56 votes, and it went to the House, and it passed, and President Clinton signed it. But this is a different day, so everything has been made much more difficult. I suspect Rand Paul, Senator Paul, may do 2 amendments. He may do 5 amendments to the USA Freedom Act. He may do no amendments, but we'll probably go through an amendment process. If the bill remains as it is, we're 3 votes away from cloture. And I think those 3 votes are possible. If it isn't, there's a vernacular which I won't use, but if it isn't messed up in the amendment process.
You're among friends.
Yeah, in the amendment process. Yeah. If not, the agency, as you have well described, ends at midnight, and that creates a chink in our armor. There's no question in my mind about that. Now, having said that, there are also other things that can be done. We have a backup bill. The big difference in our backup bill is that it mandates the telecoms to hold the data for 2 years. And it also changes the advocate to an amicus. Otherwise, it's fairly similar to the Freedom Act. I will vote for the Freedom Act. I think we should do it. We should try it. The president wants it. The House wants it. It's a way to continue the program and to make the basic reform, which is that the government will no longer hold the data.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier. You talked about the number of queries there are, the number of cases that actually get a warrant and are investigated. I think one of the questions a lot of Americans have had, which you've partly answered, but I want to pursue it a little bit, is this program and the other programs that we learned about from Edward Snowden, all of which you're familiar with, do these really make a difference? Are they really preventing terrorist attacks? It's very hard in Washington to get anyone to be specific about exactly how effective they are. You alluded to one case.
I just gave you
Right.
one.
So is there more than one?
I believe there's more than one. Having said that, this information, as I've also pointed out, goes to other nations, to allied countries, when the planning involves them. But I believe the one opportunity we have is to disrupt a plot before it happened. Now, the Boston bombing was not disrupted. And so we've had questions, why wasn't 215 used? And it wasn't. Didn't get good answers. I mean, these were, we all know about what happened there. The New York, there have been a New York subway that's been prevented, a Times Square bombing that's been prevented. Where else, David? I'm trying to think.
The FBI arrests people every week who are trying to conduct.
Pardon me?
The FBI is arresting people every week who are trying to travel to Syria or trying to conduct attacks at home, and those are disrupted by intelligence programs like this.
Yeah, what David said is, and it's right, it's people are arrested every week for plotting.
And trying to go to Syria.
Yeah, but somehow we don't pay much attention to those.
So before we go to some questions from the audience, you know, I've noticed over the years, I've known a lot of the senators who served on this committee. This is a thankless job.
Oh, yes.
I doubt there are many Californians who vote for or against you when you're running for re-election based on, you know, your service on this committee. So why do you serve on the committee? There are a lot of committees where the connection to your constituents is much clearer, much easier for people to understand.
Well, I mean, I do other things too. That's also thankless like water in California and trying to find a way. Why do I serve? I went on to the committee the year before 9/11, and 9/11 struck me so deeply. And I've been back to New York, and what you see in the museum, what you see at the fountain, what you see in the number of babies and families. I don't know if you've seen the fountain, but they put a white rose on everybody's birthday all year long, so the little white roses stick up. There's no rank or serial number how people are put, but they're grouped in families. Pilots are sort of grouped together. And it was so beyond anybody's comprehension that somebody could do this and just want to kill innocent people working in a building, and the way in which it was done. That because I was already on the committee, I was really cemented to want to see that the community works as well. We have 16 different intelligence agencies, works as well as it does. And then came the Iraq War, and we saw the real fallacy in some of what's called a national intelligence estimate, which did say that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, which was wrong. So what you want is to be right. So there is this constant striving for right. And I can't explain it, but to make things right, to do them right, to do them well, to protect our country, to protect our values as Americans. And this was my opportunity to do that. I was assigned to the committee by the leader, and everything's done by seniority. As you percolate up in seniority, you have an opportunity to become chairman, and in the chairman, you set the table, so to speak. You make the determinations of what will come up, what the committee will do. And so it's an opportunity to try to change some things. That was the torture report. We started the torture report on a bipartisan basis. And that fell apart when the Attorney General decided that he was going to investigate 2 deaths that took place in Afghanistan in 2 black sites. And the Republicans pulled out. So we continued as a Democratic majority. And it's interesting to me because there has been a lot of difficult things to handle in terms of statements have been made, but there has not been one fact that's been wrong in the report, with just one small exception, and that was an appendix where one addition was wrong of numbers. So I think it's a very important document. I believe one day it will all be declassified. We just have the summary declassified now, which is about, how many pages? 500 pages. 7% of it is redacted, unfortunately.
I would say, just speaking for myself, I thought it was very courageous of you to push that report out into the public.
Oh, well, I don't really feel it that way, but thank you, that's nice. Thank you very much.
So before we finish with that and go to a question from the floor, I had one other question related to that, which is, I was astounded when it turned out that the CIA was spying on your committee. I mean, come on, you know.
That's interesting.
What, you know, you were, I gather, not amused.
No. No, and I'll tell you that story. It happened in 2010 that it was brought to my attention that our walled-off computers, the flow of information, cables, emails, other things, was to come in on one set of computers. And then we had walled-off computers that were just for the use of our staff. And we learned in 2010 that 870 documents had been removed. And a second time, another 50 documents had been removed. And so I went up to the White House and I talked to the White House, and they said, let us look into it. And we received an apology. It was true. And this time, what happened is, we don't know who or how, but Leon Panetta had asked his staff to assess what we were doing. And an assessment, which has been termed the Panetta Review, came through, and the staff saw it, and they took it and walled it off in our computers to be able to study it. And sure enough, it verified what we were doing was correct. So it became an important document. Well, they went into our computers to remove that document. I don't know, it could have been a whistleblower. I don't know who sent it through, but it came through. And it was a real dust-up. There's no question about it. And I think was a violation of separation of powers, pure and simple. But again, what we were doing was controversial. People didn't want to believe it. And this document will stand the test of time. And I think with this document, we have a good opportunity to have it never again happen. We're fortunate. John McCain is on our side. We hope when the defense bill comes to the floor to do an amendment which would extend something called the Army Field Manual, which is the interrogation document which was put together under General Petraeus's command and used by the Army all over the world. And it is a very solid document. And we would like to extend it to the whole government. And we will hopefully do that with an amendment and also limit the CIA's ability to detain anybody. CIA is an intelligence agency, and it shouldn't be running detention centers.
Russ, do you have some questions?
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for coming to Stanford, or returning to Stanford in such a timely manner. I have a few audience questions that I'll moderate for you.
You're going to have to speak louder
I'm sorry.
if I'm
Okay.
expected to answer.
All right.
My ears are plugged up. I have a cold.
Okay, sorry about that. At the root of the public's reaction to the Snowden affair is distrust in government. In your view, has trust increased, decreased, or stayed the same since you came to office?
I can't hear him. Why don't you let me see it?
Oh, you won't be able to read this.
It's
like a doctor's handwriting.
Read it more loudly,
Okay,
Russ.
sorry about that. At the root of the public's reaction to the Snowden affair is distrust in government. In your view, has trust increased, decreased, or stayed the same since you have been in office?
Has what in?
Trust in government.
Oh, trust in government.
Yeah.
Trust goes up when there's no controversy. And trust goes down when there is controversy. And what we've had is much more partisanship, much more stridency, a big advent of Tea Party people who don't care about following the rules or really, in my view, being very constructive. And I think trust drops because it becomes much more difficult to get anything done. And I think Democrats, and I happen to be a Democrat, lost the Senate because we couldn't get business moved. We couldn't get appropriation bills passed. It was all held up. And that brings on a lack of trust in government.
Okay. What do you think of Edward Snowden's actions, and how should the U.S. government treat him at this point?
What do you think of Edward Snowden's actions, and how should the government respond to him?
I have very strong feelings about it. Edward Snowden has said in a newspaper, which I have read, that he took the job with the intent to scrape the system. That's different than finding something that you don't like and want to reveal. He not only revealed intelligence data, he revealed all kinds of military data and military operations. The terrorist movements have seen this and have changed their operations because of it. I think it's a very serious crime. It would be one thing if he came to the Intelligence Committee, certainly while I was chairman, we would have appointed staff to have looked at it immediately. We would have provided some report on what was happening. He could have gone to anybody, could have gone to the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, but he didn't. And he took millions of pages of data, and who knows what use is going to be made still of a lot of it. So I don't respect him for what he did. I believe he should come back to the United States and take his punishment, candidly, which I doubt very much that he will do, but that's what I believe.
So this raises a really interesting question. The programs that he exposed, whether we think of him as a hero or a traitor, but the programs that he exposed were all programs, presumably, that the Senate Intelligence Committee was aware of.
No.
No?
No. This is raw data. This could be names of assets, it's military operations, it's communications between officers, it's all kinds of different stuff.
But I'm
it's not, it's, and I mean, it's reams and reams and reams of it.
I understand that, but a lot of the material speaks to programs that the NSA was running, which I cannot believe the Intelligence Committee was unaware of. The program, the PRISM program, you know, in which the NSA was going into the back doors and sometimes the front doors of Silicon Valley companies to collect data. There's just one program after another that he revealed. So I'm not talking about the details, but I'm just talking about these programs. They clearly were programs that were approved by the administrations of George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and authorized, I assume, by the House of Representatives and the United States Senate, and funded by them. NSA can't operate programs without money. The money comes from the Congress. So what I'm asking is, if he had not done this, would anyone be paying attention to these programs? Would the public ever have learned about them and been able to discuss them? Would there ever have been an opportunity for the country to have a debate about these programs?
Well, it depends, I think, on what you're speaking about, which programs. Some of the programs have been there for decades, decades and decades. And I can't answer the question as to everything that he got. I only know a few things, and those things, I think, could have been rebutted by the NSA. There was a choice not to, but could have been. And I don't know what else he will reveal. I mean, the amount of data that he took was probably far beyond, you know, there are 16 different agencies doing different things in the intelligence world. It's impossible to know everything that's going on.
Russ?
Sure. CIA Director Brennan has announced a major reorganization of the CIA. What's your view on these changes?
Well, my view is time is going to tell. I think what he's trying to do is break it up into various geographic areas, have specific people in charge of those areas, of everything, so that there is greater accountability. And I give him credit for that. One of the problems is the lack of accountability. One of the problems is that so many contractors are used. And contractors should not be used in what is an essential governmental function. And we've been trying to wean down every year in the budget the number of contractors. The two people referred to in the press as Mitchell and Jessen, who did the interrogation program, were contractors. Nobody was responsible. They handled the program. They did the interrogation. They made the judgments whether it was successful. That shouldn't be like that. So I think there's a lot to do. I mean, this isn't simple, and it's not concise, but I think John Brennan has made a step forward by saying that we're going to increase accountability, we're going to have a different organization, and these are the people that are going to be responsible for different tasks, and do that, break it down in all of the key areas of the world where America gathers intelligence.
I'm going to open it up to the world a little bit. How should the U.S. respond to the current activity in the South China Sea?
Chinese activity,
well, this is an interesting question. I started to go to China in 1979 when, as a new mayor, I determined that we should begin a sister city relationship with Shanghai. Shanghai was a big port city, huge city, and I thought San Francisco, Old Gold Mountain, beloved by the Chinese people, would be a good start. And I met a number of the ministers, and it just so turned out that the new mayor of Shanghai was Jiang Zemin, who went on to become president, and then the mayor after him was Zhu Rongji, who became premier, and they began to change the nature of the country. I had a very good relationship with Jiang. I asked him about the islands, the Spratlys, and he said to me, we will never use force. We will go to an international court for the decision. Well, this is a different military. It is young, it is educated, it is bright, and it is pushing out. They're pushing out the international boundary in the sea and taking in the Spratlys. They're building a big runway on one reef that is big enough to take the biggest military plane. And David was just telling me about an article where they were dropping from the air lighthouses onto these reefs. So clearly, it's a different day. And I worry a lot about this because the China that I have made 30, 40 visits to is not the China of today. And it is highly competitive. It is eating our lunch when it comes to cyber intrusion. And it is extraordinarily serious. And it is my belief, it used to be the Chinese were, you make friends, and then you do business with your friends. That's really no longer the case. And China is now practicing soft power and reaching out. And the trade agreement that we have just taken some votes on, they are going to counter with the Silk Road and another agreement. My hope would be that they would want to be included in what is aiming to be a level trading field, a level which is where there is assistance, where there is enforcement, and where there is no child labor, there is no forced labor, where copyrights are respected, and where you have a mechanism to solve some of these problems short of court, which is extremely difficult still to do. If businesses have problems in China, the court system is extraordinarily difficult for them. So I'm very worried because I have a great feeling for China and the culture that's Chinese and the background of that culture. And I do not see China as a necessary enemy. I see China as a potential ally, always have. And it seems to be going the opposite direction now. I'd like to see it reversed.
Okay, one last question from the audience.
Okay. Should federal agencies be allowed to take down or shut down known terrorist, drug trafficking, or child pornography networks?
I'm sorry.
Should the federal government be allowed through cyber activity to take down websites for terrorist activity?
We have passed out a bill out of our committee, 14-1, to really begin our first bill on cyber. And it's in the information sharing area. And what it does is say company to company or company to government that if you share exclusive cyber-related information with each other or with the government, you have full liability protection. But that doesn't include any of the things you're talking about. It is strict liability protection for cyber-related information.
So
It does not deal with sex trafficking.
I wanted to ask one cybersecurity question. We'll close with that. Stanford, as you may know, has got a cyber initiative. The Hewlett Foundation is helping to fund it. Similar program, I think, at Berkeley and MIT. As citizens, what should we be most concerned about in terms of cybersecurity?
Well, this is very hard. You know, the government has been criticized. I am from the generation that's developmentally disabled when it comes to this stuff. I'm just gonna, so a senator pulled out my iPhone and he said, let me show you what I can learn from just looking at your iPhone about your behavior. And my eyes almost fell out of my head. And David did the same thing today and showed me all the different areas. So we live at a time where our personal data is really at risk, and not from the government, from the private sector. Where we shop, what we buy is sold to others. Facial recognition is now possible. You can take a picture of somebody looking in a window at a department store one day soon, seeing what they like, run their facial recognition, and know who they are, and be able to send them certain information about products they can purchase. Our homes are all on the Google map. You can find out where I have been every day this week. And I kind of object to that.
Well, let it be known that Senator Feinstein came to Stanford University today.
Yeah, right.
Right, okay. So I want to thank everyone who came today, and those of you who have been faithful attendees at the Security Conundrum series. And I most of all want to thank Senator Feinstein, not only for coming today, but for serving the country as responsibly and carefully as you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. To tell you this, my husband went to Cal. I went to Stanford. So we have an ongoing debate. And this is such a great university. I am just so proud my granddaughter was able to experience it. So thank all of you who are connected with this wonderful place.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.